What is the most practical rifle? That's a tough call. Let's look at that together today. Now, often it's referred to as going down a rabbit hole. This is a little bigger than that. So grab your headlamps and let's go spelunking into the deep dark cave that is, what is the most practical rifle today? On Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way. God is number one, period. I hope to keep him number one in everything that I do, and this podcast is no different. That said, let's get into the bio today. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in his very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, if you want to thank me for that service in a practical way, scroll down and give a review or just hit some stars, give a quick, easy rating. Now let's talk about today's topic. The most practical rifle. Notice I didn't say the most tactical rifle. I said the most practical rifle. And here's where we get into some nuance and some gray area, and what makes this so hard is that practical for me may not be practical for you. Practical for me might be far different here in the Oregon rainforest than it is if you're listening in an apartment in Manhattan, or I dare say even South Africa. Shout out to all the listeners in South Africa. I appreciate you wherever you're listening from. The most practical rifle. This is not your Red Dawn rifle, as that is not the most practical scenario. I cannot recall the last time I peed my radiator. As much as I like that movie, this is not your Red Dawn rifle. This is not your one rifle to rule them all. I like that thought experiment. I really do. I like putting myself in those mental gymnastics to see what it would be. If I only had to pick one, I know what my answer would be. This is not that episode. As a patron pointed out to me, and if you don't know, we have these kind of discussions all the time on Patreon. If you want to be part of the tribe, the inner circle, we don't just talk about gun stuff, so we talk about more important stuff. But we do talk a lot about guns, as you can imagine. We're gun guys. If you want to be a part of that chat, you can sign up on Patreon, get there via Good Shepherd Training, or hit the link. Anyway, one of the patrons wisely pointed out to me that the heading for the hills and grabbing your one long gun is not the most likely scenario. And I agree, it's not. I'm not saying it's impossible, especially for me who has done that before and is hoping to do that again if I can get caught up on podcasts voluntarily. Literally heading out into the wilderness, the rainforest, millions of acres of forest and streams. As today is the opening day for some what I would consider dangerous game in this area. Mountain lion and bear. I'll do that kind of thing voluntarily, but it's probably not the most likely. I'm not saying you shouldn't plan for it or be prepared for it, but that's not the scope of today's discussion. That is not the scenario that we're in. What's the most practical rifle? And I am bless you for my background. Also, I think except for 2 states, I've been to all 50 states. So I have a decent understanding of different environments. I grew up as a poor boy in the southeastern United States, hunting and fishing a lot for the younger years of my life. Probably wouldn't fly today, but some good parenting was giving me a rifle and sending me out in the woods and say, hey, bring back dinner. I've also lived in New England. I've also lived in many states in the West. From the deserts of Arizona to the forests of Flagstaff, Arizona, to the Sierra Nevada mountains, deserts of Nevada, southern and northern Idaho, which are quite different. The Redoubt, as it's often referred to. And visited and been to many others. The Ozarks, right now, coastal Oregon. Just as a brief aside, that I've been in these different environments. I've been blessed to have a number of different jobs. Now I realize that most of you are not professional hunters, not professional big game hunters or guides as I have been in the past, or the commander of tactical teams, or perhaps corporate management for a multi-billion-dollar company. I've been blessed to do those things, to have a different background, and perhaps I can bring that in today on the discussion of the most practical rifle. I think we should start, as I like history, and I think we should glean from it as much as we can. What was kind of the most practical rifle of days of yore? And I would say, for a big chunk of this country's history, what we think of as the nostalgia, the good old days, it was a lever-action rifle. Now, prior to that, it was a muzzleloader, but let's not get crazy. That's a little antiquated today. The lever-action rifle was what I think of as the first real modern, repeatable, practical rifle. And by practical, I mean 2 things. Being able to defend oneself and defend others from being the victim of violent crime. And being able to feed one's self. We see this as a common theme going back to the American West. That's 2 things that they had to do. whether it was a cowboy defending from cattle rustlers or a pioneer defending himself from savage Indians. You may take offense to that term, but I don't. There was savagery on both sides of that conflict. I recently read, thanks to one of the patrons, again talking about the Patreon chat, Empire of the Summer Moon, where it talks about our war with the Comanche. And we did some heinous, brutal things. And by we, I mean the European settlers, which didn't include me because my mom came here from Italy when she was 5, and I believe my grandfather came here on my father's side. My ancestors weren't even here. But there was savagery on both sides. The Indians certainly were savage, catching the white settlers and doing things like cutting their feet off and making them walk around for entertainment was one of the things the Indians did in that book. Also killing young infants by dragging them around. Not to mention the horrific things done to women, both young and old. I won't get into that. But there was savagery on both sides. The men going into that environment needed protection from that. They also needed to feed themselves. Now, they often took rations and things like that, but they often needed to feed themselves as well. What we think of as kind of an iconic part of the American West, that lever action rifle, because it was good for that. It was good for both. It was used to great effect for both. Now this come a little bit afterwards, but it's still in that same vein. I'm not sure of the exact year, but the late 1800s, lever actions were already in common use. There were a few different models. They were a thing. And then in the late 1800s, 1890s of one year or another, the 30-30 came out. And I think the 30-30 is one of the first modern cartridges. People may disagree, but I would consider it the first intermediate cartridge. And I would consider a lever action 30-30 perhaps the first assault rifle. I know people might disagree with that. But if you look at the amount of firepower and the range that rifle offers, it really was a giant leap forward. You look at that compared to, the front-loading muskets of the Civil Wars that was just a few decades earlier. I would submit to you that a lever action 30-30 was perhaps the first real practical rifle with a good rate of fire and a good ability to defend oneself from violent crime and put meat on the table. Now, there were certainly others before that you could argue were good. The 30-30 is still being used today to put food on the table and put animals in the dirt, and has been. Yeah, somebody may still hunt with a 44 Henry or something, but it's really obscure and they're doing it for the experience. Plenty of practical people from New England to Idaho, I believe, still go out with 30-30 lever actions and take game. It's still a viable cartridge today. Whatever the politicians might have you believe, the .223, the .556, the AR, the assault rifle, the 30-30 is far more powerful than a .556 round. And although I wouldn't want to go in a gunfight with a 30-30 lever action versus somebody with an M4 carbine, I certainly wouldn't consider one or the other a foregone conclusion if one has good fundamentals of marksmanship, bravery, and fortitude. Again, one is not so far behind as to call it a foregone conclusion. So I'd submit that is probably the first practical rifle. Is it still practical today? I'd say you're kind of behind the curve. I'd say we can do better. It may be a good choice if you live in a state that restricts your rights back to the technology of the 1800s. You can't have a modern, box magazine fed repeating rifle. If your place that you choose to stay in literally keeps you back to 1800s technology in the area of firearms, then yeah, it might still be practical. Or if it's what you have, you inherited it. Yeah, train with it, practice with it. It's still decent, but I think we can get more practical and better because of two areas. The rifle itself is, and the cartridge is still very good and very capable, but I think semi-automatic is better. I think semi-automatics have gotten to the point of accuracy where some people may disagree with this when I talk about one of the other categories. But I think semi-auto is the way to go. Semi-auto has a lot of advantages. Speed is fine, but accuracy is final. But speed is still fine, and semi-autos are fast. Semi-autos also allow you to shoot the gun one-handed if needed. This is gunfighter life. It is not uncommon in a gunfight, even if you're the good guy, to get shot. I have a bullet hanging out my leg right now. Getting shot in an appendage is not unheard of. Being able to shoot that gun with either arm, with one arm, that's a real thing. That really happens. Look at, I believe it was the FBI famous 1980s shootout, where the 40 Smith & Wesson kind of delineated from that incident. Or perhaps it was the Newhall shootout. I don't remember. Both of those are iconic. But in one, the man had to shoot his shotgun one-handed. Try running a bolt gun with one arm, or a lever action with one arm. I'm not saying you can't do it. It sure looked cool in Terminator 2 with the lever action shotgun, but it's not practical, and it's not as fast. I think today, with modern semi-autos, that is the way to go. There probably are still a few states that don't let you hunt with semi-autos, and that kind of sucks. I'm going to be honest, but most do. I think for that reason, if you can get a good practical, not the most tactical, I'm not talking, Daniel Defense Mark 18, that's tactical. It's not the most practical. But a good practical semi-auto, I think that's the way to go. The other big advancements, I'd say probably even as important as semi-auto capability or box magazine fed capability, is optics. The ability to mount optics in a decent way. I'm not talking about like an AK where it wasn't designed for optics and you have to do some kind of crazy thing to mount an optic on there and it's on a part that moves or bends or something like that. A good way to mount modern optics. And I'm not hating on the AK. The AK is a fine battlefield rifle, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about a practical rifle. And I think in 2022, even if you have backup iron sights, which I encourage, you should have a way to mount a good modern optic. The Winchester 94 30-30 doesn't really let you do that. They did make some models like the Angle Eject and things like that that do, and I'd say that's a better choice than the original for this purpose, not for nostalgia's sake. Kind of looks funny to see a Winchester 94 with a scope on it, but if you're looking for practicality and not nostalgia, nostalgity, is that a word? It is now. Just made it up. But if you're looking for practicality, ability to mount a good modern optic, I've never seen one, but no doubt if you mounted a 30-30 Winchester 94 with a red dot, maybe I have seen one somewhere, but if you did that, it would certainly help you out as far as getting fast, accurate hits, the same way it helps out an AR. But I'd say semi-automatic capability and the ability to mount an optic should be on a practical rifle, if, again, you can have that. Some would say, especially some in the Patreon group, that the Scout rifle is the most practical rifle. I'd say the Scout rifle is perhaps one of the most practical manually operated guns. I will concede that. Find yourself in an urban environment, car breaks down and your room clearing, that's probably not a rifle that I want. Again, I wouldn't call it a foregone conclusion, but I'd say it's behind the curb. That's a thing that can happen, in today's world. You find yourself in a riot or a mob situation with a bunch of people trying to drag you out of your car and, again, commit violent crime against you. A Scout rifle is good. It's a great all-around rifle, but I don't know that it's as good as a semi-auto in these kind of situations. Also, again, if you're shot in the arm, or if one arm is broken, let's say they try and run you off the road. And a good counter argument to that would be, well, I have a semi-auto handgun for that. And I'd say, yeah, that's a good plan. But again, I think in 2022, if we're talking most practical, let's look at the semi-autos. They are plenty accurate enough, I think, to get, hits on medium-sized game or defensive targets out to several hundred meters, several hundred yards, which is the vast majority of any practical situation. Again, this is not a sniper rifle. You can have a hard time in a defense scenario shooting somebody at 500 yards. Is it possible? Is there some scenario you could think of where that is legit? You happen to be on a rooftop 500 meters away and you see an active shooter in progress and you have the ability and optics and computers to range find it and get a shot in. It's possible, but it's not likely. A couple of 100 meters and in where you can actually see with your own eyes, that's a lot more likely. Practical scenario. So you're probably thinking, we're almost 21 minutes into this, or you probably don't know how long it is. I'm looking at the clock. But we've been talking about this for a while. What do you think are the most practical rifles? All right, I'm going to give you a few. And this one is not nearly as old as a 3030, but she's been around a while. And that's the SKS. SKS is still a great practical rifle. I know they used to be $100 and some, and now they're, $300 to $500. I still think they're a good deal. I still think the quality that they were made with as a battlefield rifle that still points and handles a lot like a hunting rifle. In fact, that was kind of the poor man's hunting rifle when I was growing up. And I can't imagine the countless number of deer that have gone to the freezer with an SKS. That's a good round. It's a good rifle. So it's a little bit better. Still, yes, I know you can mount optics on them, but again, it's not made for that. It's not a great thing to mount optics on. So I would submit, along that same vein, but better, and especially with the jump up in price of the SKS, the Ruger Mini 30 would kind of be my common everyday man's pick for a practical rifle. I think they still do come with scope rings. You can get them in stainless steel, depending on your environment. The Ruger Mini 30. If you only want 223 5.56, which I don't think is a great practical round, it's a great specialty round. It's a great round for what it is. It can take deer. It's not a great deer round or intermediate round. So you can go that route with the Mini 14, and the Mini 14 has certainly been used by law enforcement. I'd say it's certainly a capable offensive rifle and certainly a capable defensive rifle and a good hunting rifle. The Mini 30 gives you that with a little bit more firepower in the 7.62 by 39. The Mini 30 I think still comes with good solid scope mounts. You're not doing some kind of weird workaround thing to mount an optic. You can literally make a good optics choice and just bolt on, with the scope rings that come with it, a good modern optic. You can buy the rifle, you can mount an optic, you can zero it, you can train with it, and you have a good modern semi-auto intermediate cartridge, stainless steel, all weather, all kinds of environments. Decent truck gun if you want to pull it out and shoot a coyote or two on the ranch. Or you're on your way home and you decide you want to walk through the deer woods and see if you can scare any game up. You've got a good rifle if you want to hop on a horse and put it in a scabbard. For scouting or anything like that, you have a good rifle. If it's behind the seat of your car or riding, in your center console, laying against your center console, if you have to go to the big city to get a pound of nails or a pound of sugar or whatever you go to the city for, or you wear a suit and a tie and you work there every day, you have to drive from the suburbs to the city, which a lot of people do, and you get caught up in a riot or you get caught up in a civil unrest scenario and you have to grab that gun, it's a good choice. I would not turn my nose up at a good Mini 30 with a good optic that was well zeroed and I had trained with. A good sling, a good white light, is it as good for that specific thing if I'm kicking down doors as a Daniel Defense Mark 18? No, but it's way better if I'm walking through the deer woods and I want to shoot a deer than a Mark 18. Again, it's not the most tactical rifle, it's a practical rifle. And then I drive day to day from the suburbs to the city, and then on the weekend, maybe I want to hop in a canoe and go down a river and I might see a bear. It's a good rifle for that. And that's what I mean by most practical rifle. I'd say that Mini 30. And I like stainless steel. You may not apply to you if you're in Arizona or something. But, if you're in Washington State or Georgia, Stainless steel is a big deal. I think it's definitely worth it. What are some other good choices? So I think one of the sleepers kind of unknown in the gun world, especially gun culture 2.0, that people hunted with for decades and decades. The Remington 740, and 7400. I believe all those models are basically the same, different generations of basically the same model. And that's a semi-automatic, handy hunting rifle. They made them most notably in calibers like 30-06. They also made them 308, 243. They made them in all kinds of calibers. They were popular for a long time. We think of this as like a modern thing of hunting with a semi-automatic, but it's not. I want to say Roosevelt hunted with semi-automatics. They go back a long time. These were popular, These were popular in the 40s and 50s, and even before that. Don't think it's some new thing. Don't think the semi-automatics are some kind of assault weapon, because that's what the media portrays them as. The Remington Model 8 was around a long, long time before this, but these were popular, what we kind of think of as the Norman Rockwell era of America. And they're still good choices. The Remington 740, I'm just going to pick one. The 740. You get one. It comes, I think it still uses the regular, I could be wrong, but it's going to use a pretty common way that you can get good modern rings for to mount optics. Even though that rifle's a little bit older, you put a good all-around optic on it. That's a good rifle. You want to go up a little bit in power. The 30-06, the M1 Garand cartridge, our military round for World War I and World War II. Now, I wouldn't if it was a practical rifle. I'd actually probably step down and get one in 243. I think that's a good balance. If I lived somewhere like Alaska, I might want a little bit more there. Anything other than that, a 243 would be a great all-around semi-automatic choice. Again, it's sleek. Your one downside here is that the standard magazine, I don't know how many it holds, but it's not many. I do believe they made 10-round magazines for them. And 10 rounds of 308 or 243 is nothing to sneeze at. That, in most situations, is going to be enough. So I'd say that's kind of a sleeper. Most people are going to say, why not get an AR-10 variant? And I would say the big one for that is they're heavy. And I know you can get super lightweight ones, but you're probably talking about quite a bit of money, and that might keep people out. But yeah, I'd say the AR-10 can absolutely be a good choice, and they're only becoming more popular and coming down in price. A good AR-10 with a good optic in 6.5, in 308, something like that is going to be fine. Also an AR variant, but I would say not in 223. That's not a good practical round. I know, a lot of people deer hunt with it. I get it. But if you were going to go the AR-15 route, this is kind of where you'd probably want to custom build something in 6.8 or 6.5. You could make a case for 300 blackout because it's got a bunch of different options. Again, this is not the most tactical rifle, the most practical. So make sure it's a balance and you don't turn this into some mega war machine. But I'd say that really depends, because you get into the AR-10s and the AR-15 world and you can go. They're so customizable. You can literally make a good prairie dog gun out of an AR-15. You can literally make a good door-kicking suppressed gun with an AR-15 platform. So they're so versatile, I can't really pin down, but you should know whether or not it's practical or it's too tactical. Or it's too heavy. Again, this is not a sniper rifle. This is not a bull-barreled 20-inch stainless steel bull barrel with a 10-power scope. That's not practical. That's practical for prairie dogs, but it's not all around practical. We're not talking about a coyote rifle. Try doing a Mozambique drill at a reasonable distance with a 10-power scope and see how that works out for you. Now I'm going to tell you my choice. You probably know it if you've heard it before. Mine is a SCAR 17. And I know they're expensive. I know firsthand they're expensive because it took me years and years of wanting one before I bought it. And I do believe that I sold quite a few rifles to get that rifle. And that would be my one rifle if I had to pick one rifle. I believe I sold a Galil Ace 7.62 39, which was my previous kind of go-to gun For a truck gun and all-around defense hunting gun. It was kind of my one gun before that. I sold it. I do believe I sold a Beretta over and under shotgun and a lever-action Winchester. I do kind of miss those guns because it's not like I never used them, but I'm not a gun collector. I'm a gunfighter, and I think that SCAR 17, I'm happy with it. It is a 308. It has very manageable recoil. It only weighs 7.7 pounds, which is far less than a lot of rifles. It's far less than a lot of hunting rifles. Mine, I only have sample size of 1, but mine is ridiculously accurate, like cloverleaf accurate with box Hornady or box Federal ammunition. It is awesome. I have run it in some hardcore training classes. When I was the commander of a tactical team, it was a go-to designated marksman rifle. It was also a go-to door-kicking, room-clearing rifle. Our primary job was to stop active shooters, and it was often on my back for that role. And it's a good hunting rifle, too. It is a good all-around rifle. Again, it only weighs 7.7 pounds, so it's not prohibitively heavy. A lot of people's bolt-action deer rifles are going to weigh more than that. But submit that SCAR is every bit as accurate as almost all hunting rifles or bolt-action rifles. If you're talking about some crazy bench rest rifle or some crazy high-end rifle that can shoot, quarter minute, yeah, it's not there, but this is not, I didn't say sniper rifle. I've got it mounted with a good power variable optic that doesn't take batteries. It's Trijicon. It glows day or night. It uses radiation. It's a good practical rifle. That's my choice. Again, that's expensive. I know it's expensive because I wanted one, I want to say, for the better part of a decade before I actually got one. And since my life and other people's lives depended on it, when I was making that big city money and selling some other guns to pay for it, I got one. I'm happy I got it. I'm a blessed man to have it. God has truly blessed me with that gun to be able to have it. That is my one. If that's out of your price range, I get it. The CZ Bren, recently I think the patent expired on the SCAR, so the CZ Bren started copying it. And that's not to put CZ down. CZ makes good guns. And the CZ Bren is probably a fine gun. I don't even think it existed when I bought my SCAR. I've had it a while. But the CZ Bren, if you're looking, if that makes a lot of sense to you, the CZ Brens are not cheap guns, but they're quite a bit cheaper, more affordable than the SCARs are. They come with a flat rail on top. They come with rails on the side. Don't go crazy with this. Again, don't turn it into a tactical rifle. Even though I use mine in a tactical role, I may try to get crazy with it. Put a sling on it, put a light on it, and a good optic, and be done with it. I would feel fine. Now, I have specialty hunting rifles. I have my rifle that I use as a professional hunter and guide. I did a whole episode on it called the Guide's Rifle. Now, if I go, elk hunting in Idaho, I'm going to take that rifle. I'm not going to take the SCAR 17. But if you said, I'm going to buy you a free tag, but you have to take your SCAR, I'd be like, done. And I wouldn't hesitate about it at all. Now, my guide rifle weighs less. It's a bolt action. But the odds of me having to take more than one shot and a follow-up shot just to make sure something's dead, even if the first shot was good, that's what that rifle is for. It's not an all-around rifle. I'd certainly want that as my gun on my center console if I find myself in a civil unrest scenario. As a SCAR 17, I'd be certainly happy to have that by my side, whether I'm kicking in a door or dealing with a riot or in a designated marksman role or, again, hunting elk on the mountains of Idaho. It'll do all of it. It's a good practical rifle. The CZ Bren, again, would be good. And I wouldn't turn my nose up at a Ruger Mini 30. If we're talking about elk hunting, I'd probably keep the range in and make sure I had the best ammo I could find for that or hand load it. And keep the range in closer if we're talking about elk. But you may live in an area where you can't even hunt elk. Again, any of these good practical rifles, think about it like that. And if you don't have a good practical rifle, I don't have to tell you, if you've lived through the last couple of years, the world can change quite drastically, quite quickly. And I don't know what the future holds. Maybe more stability, maybe more instability. I don't know. But I know as a man, I think you should be able to defend yourself and your neighbor, and you should be able to put food on the table for you and your family. So take a look at a practical rifle. Anyway, I hope that you liked this episode of Gunfighter Life. If you did like it, and you want more and you want to be part of this tribe, consider joining on Patreon. That's all I'll say about that. As a thanks for listening, I'll throw in a tactical tip. If you got a good practical rifle, you're probably going to have a sling. I would say, if you can, get that sling in something other than black for this reason. Something I like to do is write a Bible verse on my sling, which you may or may not choose to do. And I also like to write the dope down, meaning the settings of my rifle. I write it on that sling. Like my Scar 17 has a tan sling, or desert sand, whatever you want to call it. Coyote, whatever tactical name you want to give it. It's a light brown sling. I take my tactical Sharpie and I write on there, zeroed, BZO, battle site 0 at 50 meters, and then on again. It's dead on at 50 and it's dead on again at 225. I have a point blank range on a man-sized target anywhere from 0 meters to about 275 meters with that rifle. I write that dope on there with what ammo, with what grain weight. I have that on there. If I want to take a more precise shot, I may have more precise dope written on there. Like it's an inch and it's 1.75 inches high at 100 yards. I'll have that written on the sling. Anyway, that's your tactical tip for the day. Get a gunsling that's not black. Write your dope on it. Dope just means a rifle settings. It's sighting in information. Another way you can do this, not uncommon. It doesn't work well on my Scar because of the stock configuration, but on a more traditional stock, take one of those Write in the Rain notebooks, which you probably should have if you're in this kind of community, in this kind of world, the Write in the Rain notebooks. Or just take an index card and laminate it, but write your dope on there and literally tape it to the stock of your rifle. This is not a Barbie doll. It's there to be used. Write your shot information on that card and tape it to the stock of your rifle. It's another way to do the same thing. I like the sling because it's on there anyway. It's not going to get torn off. But either way will work. If one doesn't work for you, the other probably will. With that, the tactical verse of the day. So, what do I often write on my gunslings, my gun holsters, stuff like that? Tactical verse. There's a couple of go-tos, and I'll use those as tactical verses of the day. Psalm 144. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. It's pretty fitting. Now, Psalm 91 is long, but you can pick a couple of your favorite refrains, favorite sentences from Psalm 91. I shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at my side, 10,000 at my right hand, but it shall not come near me. That's just one small part of Psalm 91. If you don't know that psalm, I'd encourage you to read it and hopefully memorize it. How about Joshua chapter 1? There's a lot of good sentences in there too. No man shall be able to stand before me all the days of my life. Or a classic, be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid or be dismayed. For the Lord my God is with me wherever I go.